Let's move on now to the next topic. And the next topic today gets sent in to us from Froy Gon Ginn, who writes, I absolutely adore the last 3 Star Trek films. J.J. Abrams and company knocked these things out of the park. They were high-quality productions and highly entertaining movies. I don't think anything more could have been done to reinvigorate this franchise. With the most recent problems in trying to get a 4th film made and declining interest from the general movie-going audience, is it just time for Paramount to abandon the idea of Star Trek as a film franchise? All right, thanks a lot for the question, man. And yeah, one of the interesting things coming out of Star Trek Beyond, which was the last Star Trek movie, which quite frankly to me was the best of the J.J. Abrams movies. I've liked all the J.J. Abrams era Star Trek films, including Into Darkness. It might be my least favorite of the 3, but I liked it. I still thought it was good. It had some very bad, cheesy moments. Khan! It had some bad, cheesy moments, yes. But overall, I thought it was good. I really liked the first one in 2009, but I thought Beyond was even the best one. But even as the best one, it made the least amount of money. Made $350, $340, $360, somewhere around that, $360, $370 million worldwide, right? We'll get to the specific numbers in a second. So one could be tempted to say, well, I mean, none of the movies made that much money. Like, I mean, it's the first one roughly made the same amount, maybe a little bit more. Into Darkness made a little bit more than that. So they're all roughly in there. So you could be tempted to say, with the third one making the least amount, by a little bit, could you say, hey, there's declining interest. There's, nobody cares about Star Trek anymore. Could you say that, with the Chris Pine and Chris Hemsworth drama now, with them leaving and all this kind of stuff, and you got some new television stuff coming, is it just time to say Star Trek should give up on the big screen? They should just give up on the big screen. Well, there's something we should keep in mind here about all that. And that is, while you might be tempted to say that there is declining interest in Star Trek and nobody cares about Star Trek anymore, let's take a couple things in mind here. Now, here we are on the website Box Office Mojo, looking at all the different Star Trek movies, right? If we look at the most recent one, Star Trek Beyond made $343 million worldwide. Okay, fine. That is the least amount that we've had out of these new movies, because whereas that one made 340 something, Star Trek Into Darkness made $467 million, and the 2009 Star Trek made $385 million. So yes, Star Trek Beyond made the least amount of money out of all the Star Trek films. That must have been established. But let's look at it in terms of the bigger picture. How is the popularity of Star Trek holding up now compared to, say, the last round of Star Trek movies we had, right? Like First Contact, like Insurrection, like things like that. Well, let's look at that. The last Star Trek movie that came out was in 2002, Star Trek Nemesis. Star Trek Nemesis, that's not a typo, folks. Star Trek Nemesis only made $67 million. $67 million worldwide. That's how much Star Trek Nemesis made. Now, let's go to the one prior to that, Star Trek Insurrection. Star Trek Insurrection only made $112 million. Like, Star Trek Beyond literally made more than triple what Star Trek Insurrection did. Let's go back to one before that, First Contact, a film that some Star Trek fans think it's their favorite Star Trek movie. Star Trek Insurrection only made $146 million. Right? Star Trek Beyond made quite a lot more than double what Star Trek First Contact made. So what I would kind of say, and what my argument would be right now, is simply this. In the grand scheme of things, Star Trek right now is more popular, and the Star Trek movies right now are more popular than they've been in 30 years. Even with Star Trek Beyond only making $340-something million, it's still far more popular than the previous generations of films that they did. Far more popular. Far more people are coming out to see them. Far more people want to go out to the movies to see them. Now, it costs more to make these movies than the other ones, sure. But you still can't argue the statistical fact that more people are coming out to the theater to see these movies now than they did in the previous generation. You can legitimately make the argument that the Star Trek movies today are more popular than the Star Trek movies have ever been, even when you adjust for inflation. So I think that means there are two sides to this coin we got to look at. Yes, the Star Trek franchise is not making $600, $700, $800 million like a lot of studios like to see their big tentpole movies do. True. On the other hand, it's doing better than any Star Trek movies before. And I think there is still a market for it. I really do. I really still believe there is a market for this. And here's the other thing. I believe partially the dip I think there are two main things that attributed to the dip in the box office results for Star Trek Beyond. Number one is that despite the fact that I liked it, a lot of other people didn't like Star Trek Into Darkness. I think a lot of people like Star Trek 2009, which is why you saw an upswing in the box office for Star Trek Into Darkness. But I also think there was a bunch of people that didn't like Star Trek Into Darkness, which attributed a little bit to the dip going into Star Trek Beyond. On top of that, do you guys remember the first trailer they put up for Star Trek Beyond? When they played Sabotage and all that kind of stuff? It was a brutal, awful trailer. Everybody hated that trailer. Me included. And I think that put them behind the eight ball. I think they were fighting an uphill battle ever since that, trying to get people, because that first trailer made that movie look stupid. And I think it was an uphill battle after that. It was a real uphill battle. So I think combining those two things contributes a little bit to the decline in box office. But I also think most people who saw Star Trek Beyond quite enjoyed it, which I think will reflect positively in whatever the next movie is. Now, you still got to get through this whole Chris Pine and Chris Hemsworth situation. You got to get these guys back on board, all that kind of stuff. But in general, nah, I don't think the big screen days of Star Trek are over. I think they're more popular today than they've ever been. We've got it looks like we've got some strong television support coming, both in the forms of Star Trek Discovery, which I quite enjoy, and we got this new Jean-Luc Picard TV show coming, on top of some other projects they've got coming. So, yeah, I think everything is positioned really for Star Trek to have a healthy existence on the big screen. Again, I don't think Star Trek is nearly popular enough to be $600 million movies or $700 million movies. No, but they can be $400 plus or $500 plus million films, which is just fine. And if they can get back to that, I think everything's fine and everybody's happy. So that's just kind of my take on that. What do you guys think? Jump down to the comments section below and leave me your thoughts. All right, let's move on to emailed in topic number 3.